Okay, so
Yeah.
anywho, we're live.
Okay. All
I'll
right.
be,
Well, that was interesting. An interesting start.
I'll,
Technical problems.
yep, tomorrow I will go through and delete that first 20 minutes.
Okay.
Tonight I'm here with Barbara Ridley. We're going to be talking about her career and her book, which I'm really excited to ask you a few questions about. Um, uh, I guess we can just dive right into it. We're a little behind. So,
Yes.
you started your
Yep.
career as a nurse. Um, how often did you publish writing in various journals during your career?
Um, I was published in medical and technical professional journals. Um, probably more than a dozen different articles. Um, Starting in the 1990s, I guess, and through to the early 2000s. Um, I retired from my nursing. Well, I was a nurse practitioner. Retired in 2015. But prior to that, starting in about 2005, I had started working very slowly because I was working full time in a very big job. But I started writing my first novel, um, inspired really by my first novel, When It's Over, is based on my mother's story. She was a refugee from the Holocaust during World War II. And it really wasn't until after she died that I was reflecting on her life and realized that her story was quite remarkable, and I wanted to find some way to preserve it. Um, but there were kind of gaps, that things that I didn't know, missing bits of information. I tried to kind of talk to some of her contemporary survivors, but some of them had died, some of them had dementia, some of them couldn't really help me. So I figured I knew the basics of the story, but the rest I would have to make up, and so I wrote it as fiction. So it's very much based on her story, but it is fictionalized.
Oh, well, I cleared off like two questions I was about to ask. Oh, but actually, I was going to, did writing in those journals prompt you to become an author, or was it something you had already planned at some point, but you kind of just answered that as you were, that
Yeah, I
did
had
it?
never really thought of doing fiction writing. I'd never taken any creative writing classes. I mean, I knew I could write because, as I say, I'd had stuff published,
Hmm,
but creative writing is very different. Um, so it was a steep learning curve for me. I had a lot to learn. My first early drafts of the first chapters were riddled with too much showing instead of telling, too many adverbs, too
yeah,
much backstory, all those kind of beginner mistakes.
yeah. And you focus on historical fiction mostly, right? With your books.
Well, no, I mean, that was my first novel.
Yeah.
And I love historical fiction. I read a lot of it.
Oh, and
But my second novel is completely different. My second novel, which was published early this year, is set in contemporary California, which is where I live.
yeah, it just, as soon as I asked it, I'm like, I know that already.
That's okay.
My bad.
Um,
Um,
no, I
and
did kind of switch genres. I mean, I consider my second novel, it's sort of literary fiction, it's character-based fiction, but it's contemporary, it's not historical.
you have a long list of published stories on your blog, and you still write for those short pieces all over the internet. From a
Yeah.
marketing perspective, has this helped you get your name out there as an author? Do people
I don't
recognize you more
know.
often, or
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they say that, don't they? I mean, they say that you get those pieces out and you're going to have agents knocking on your door or editors knocking. Well, I don't know that it really has been the case. I mean, it's nice to be able to, when I submit stuff, it's nice to be able to say that I have all these published stories. Um, I don't know. I mean, I write mostly because I really enjoy the writing. It's the act of writing, that's the creating, the putting stuff out there. And of course, it's nice when it gets accepted and published. That's a great thrill. But
yeah?
I mean, I've had a successful career. I'm not doing. I mean, I take myself seriously as a writer, but I'm not like someone who's like much younger in life who maybe really has to kind of focus on developing a career. I mean, I'm just grateful that I've had two novels published, that I've had all these short pieces published. It's all sort of icing on the cake, if you like.
Mhm.
I will continue doing it,
Mhm.
but and I do feel I feel driven in the sense that if I'm not writing something, if I don't get to my writing for a week or two, I feel something is missing. But I don't know. I guess I also feel I recognize I'm in a very privileged position because I'm retired and I have a pretty good pension from my job. And I'm just doing this because I really love it. So
You live it?
it's it builds up your credibility for sure, right? The more you get published, the more cred you have.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it really makes it easier to get success, people notice you. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Um, well, when I Googled your name, it came up on Google as you were an author, a big, author, and then your name and all that. Mine doesn't do that. So
Okay.
that's one of my goals.
All right.
To get,
Okay.
if
Well, I'll take
Google,
that. I
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
if Google recognizes you, then you know you made it.
Yeah.
So speaking of your debut novel, it won a silver in the IBPA Benjamin Franklin Award for historical fiction. And I was going to ask what guided you to write about the aftermath of World War II and the story within it, but you kind of answered that with it being your mom's story. Um, how much
I also
more?
think it's fascinating. I love World War II fiction, as I
Oh,
think a lot of people do. It's just so rich,
I love
and
World War II nonfiction.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's so much there. There's so many novels that have been written about that period, but there's so many angles. It really was a
Mm,
world war, and um, I think the early fiction focused on the battles and the war front, but there's so much behind the scenes, how civilians were affected in so many ways in different countries of the world. It's just an endless source of fascination, I think, and
yeah,
it was for me too before I started writing. I'd read a lot of fiction from World War II, and I continue to do so because it's a very rich field.
yeah. And you said that you tried to research interview as many people as you could. How much more research did you have to put into when it's over?
Oh, I did a ton. I did a ton. It was um, it was really important to me to be historically accurate. I mean, I hate it if I read fiction when it's a topic that I know something about, and you can just see that the author didn't do their due diligence in terms of research and
Mm,
made sort of stupid errors. And when you're writing historical fiction, for me, I remember writing a scene and I wanted to have someone discover a dry cleaning receipt in a pocket. And then I thought, dry cleaning. What was dry cleaning like in Paris in 1939? So then you go down this rabbit hole of research. Did they even have dry cleaning? Would they even have a receipt? What would the receipt look like? Because to me, if you're going to put a little detail like that in, or about the food or whatever,
mhm,
as an author, I think you have a responsibility to get it right. Um, but it's a tricky thing because then you end up, at least I ended up doing so much research and finding it all fascinating.
yeah,
All these little tidbits of information that I had about World War II, life in London and Paris during World War II, and then you have to resist the temptation to put it all in because you can then just swamp your reader with
oh, yeah.
details that you might think are fascinating, but don't really pertain to the arc of the story that you're trying to
Yeah.
write.
That's I just
So,
I'm wrapping up the edits of my next book. It's based in Atlantic City in 1874.
oh
So
wow,
yeah, that was a lot of research too.
yeah,
And there was times where I would add something and I had to go back and like, did this even exist? And I had to change like 7 or 8 things in the book because they didn't exist in
right,
1874.
right,
So yeah, I feel you.
yeah.
I even had
But
to
it's also
change.
fun, right? I love the research.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I learned a
Yeah,
lot about 1874 Atlantic City.
I bet you did. Yeah.
And so let's see, when it's over is available on Audible. I know a lot of
Yes.
people, including some of the viewers here, um, that are interested in trying audiobooks. What has been your experience with it so far?
Well, I didn't put it out in Audible until about, well, when was it? 2 years ago or something. So several years after the print and the ebook was published. Um, but of course, in that interim period, Audible books have expanded so much, and so many people access books that way now.
Yeah.
Um, and so I decided to go ahead and do it, and I used Findaway. I had a very good experience. I found an absolutely superb narrator, Gilly Bond. She's a British actress. My characters have a lot of different accents from different parts of Europe and different parts of the UK, and she just was a master at the accents, and we just had a really good rapport. She really liked the novel, which
Mm.
is always nice to hear. She told me she's a pretty experienced narrator, and she told me she had narrated dozens and dozens of books, but she really enjoyed mine more than most, and actually went out and bought a copy for her husband because she thought he would like it so much. So we just had a very nice connection, and I think she did a wonderful job, and it's quite amazing to have it come to life in a different narrator's voice.
Yeah, it was. You have a clip of it on your website, and I played it. And this is the Jilly
Yeah.
Bond, right? Is that her name?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it was. It almost, you could almost, the way she reads it, it's almost like she's putting you in World War II or in that 1945
Absolutely.
era. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was, it was
Yeah.
nice. I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thrilled with the job that she did. So
Um, and if anybody's wondering, I do have links to the Barbara's blog and the book. When it's over is available on Amazon, and the links are in the video's description down below. Um,
thank you.
your second book, Unswerving. This is where I was like, duh, I know that because I not only did I look up the book, but I also read the blog post that you wrote.
Okay.
Um, and it has an interesting undertone. Can you tell the audience what prompted you to write Unswerving and the things you thought about while doing so? Because I read the blog post, writing the other,
Yeah.
and I thought it would be nice for those who are watching the video, especially I got a couple here that write something similar. So if you
Oh,
can kind of break
okay.
down a little bit of your
Yeah.
thoughts from that.
Yeah. So, um, I published my first novel. I published, as you mentioned, some short pieces, but I felt like I got the bug. I wanted to write another novel. I wanted to get my teeth into a big project again. And my clinical practice, I mean, I worked for 30 years as a rehabilitation nurse, working predominantly with people who've had neurological disabilities like spinal cord injury or multiple sclerosis or head injury. And I became very involved or connected, I should say, with the disability community in Berkeley, California, where I was working, and became very aware. I mean, my work was to help people adjust to these kinds of severe injuries and disabilities and find a new purpose in their life. And through the disability community, I really kind of learnt the value of community, of people with disabilities being able to support each other, the incredible value of adaptive sports. We have an organization here in Berkeley, BORP, Berkeley Outreach and Recreation, which does all kinds of adaptive sports and recreational activities for people with a range of disabilities. But when I thought about literature or even movies, popular culture, movies that you see or books that I read that had characters with disabilities, it felt to me that it was such a classic trope just to have a character with a disability either had to be cured or their life was so miserable that they had to kill themselves. And there was no kind of I think maybe this is beginning to change a little bit now, but I feel like there's still a dearth of positive portrayals of disability, positive and realistic portrayals of disability. Um, So I felt like when I thought about writing another novel, that that's what I wanted to do. So the novel features a young woman who is severely injured in a car accident. She's kind of very estranged from her family. She's also kind of a pretty closeted young lesbian. Her lover was in the car with her, but she doesn't, as the novel opens, she just doesn't know. She kind of assumes that her lover must have died in the crash because nobody's told her anything. So she's in a pretty desperate situation. But over the course of the novel, she begins to regain a sense of self and imagine how her life can go forward. Um, and as I wrote in that piece that you mentioned, I don't have a disability myself. I think when I first started writing the novel, that concept of writing the other, whether you should or should not, was not so prevalent or so, not so widely discussed as I think it is now. Um, so I felt that we're very well grounded in the
Mhm.
disability community and in that experience from my clinical practice over the years, but I still felt it was very important for me to run early drafts of the manuscript by two women that I knew who had become friends, women who had lived for many years with spinal cord injury, for them to kind of validate that I was writing from that point of view without making too many huge errors and to kind of
Yeah.
transgressing too much in any way. I do have a secondary protagonist in the book who is a physical therapist, so a rehab professional. Um, so I felt much more confident in writing that because that's what was my field for many years. And Beth is a physical therapist who really gets over involved trying to rescue Tave, the young woman with a spinal cord injury. Um, so I felt I was also exploring the issue of boundaries in healthcare, which I think is an important issue, which again maybe does not get addressed very much in fiction.
That's a good point. And having your background in nursing probably made was a big boon.
Yes. Yes. People sometimes ask me, oh, did you have to do a lot of research for this book? And I say, well, not really, not
Uh,
compared to writing a World War II novel.
Did it for
so
40 years.
so yeah,
Well, sometimes experience counts.
yeah, yeah.
Um, do you have any, what are you working on now? I couldn't find anything uh, that you were mentioned of if you
Yeah,
were
well,
writing
I
more.
always have two or three short stories that I'm working on, trying to pitch, trying to get published, revising, and I have started work on another novel, kind of very slowly. It's been an interesting process. This third novel, I really don't know where it's going. I'm kind of, the people talk about either plotters or pantsers, people who just fly by the seat of their pants when they're writing a novel. And in this one, I'm very much pantsying my way through. Um, it starts off with a group of people who are, some of whom know each other, some don't know each other, and they go up to a cabin in the mountains in California here for the weekend in the winter, and they get stuck in a snowstorm. So what's supposed to be a weekend turns into 4 or 5 days. They're stuck without power. There's various things happen. Somebody gets injured. They don't know how seriously at first.
Mm.
Um, and so I've written probably about 40,000, no, maybe 35,000 words of that. So maybe half the novel. I've written an early draft of the first part, which takes place in January. And now I'm working on the second part, which is when some of these characters and a few new characters go back to the same place in the summer.
Fun.
So I don't ask me how it ends because I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm a plotter. I have to know where I'm going. Mostly because I
Yeah,
forget.
yeah. I
Like,
mean, this is a really different experience for me. Um, and it's kind of interesting just to see how, I'm not sure how it's going to work.
well, I used to be a pantser. Um, but with everything I have going on, I find that plotting just helps me keep everything organized because I will forget what I just wrote.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I'm only able to come
yeah.
back to it after a prolonged time. So, Eh, yeah, whatever
Well,
works.
I'm doing yeah, I'm doing some plotting because or I wrote about 4 or 5 chapters and then I thought, "Well, wait a minute. What is happening here? What am I doing?" And then I sort of tried to kind of plot those or sort of list those chapters and what happens and what gaps I needed to fill in, things that I needed to kind of flush that out with. So I did a certain amount of that. And then when I completed the draft, the first half, then I had to kind of think, well, what's going to happen in the second half? So I do a little bit of plotting as I go along, but I really, it's kind of fun. It's kind of an adventure because I actually don't know where it's going. I'm discovering it.
Yeah, that's good. Um, I would be more. My biggest concern is continuity. Just I know I'm gonna forget. Like I did that in my first book where I had a plot device that I completely forgot about after the first draft.
Yeah.
Beta readers gone through it. Everybody loves the story, and I'm reading through it for edits. I'm like, uh-oh.
Wow.
So I had to fix it. It was kind of
Yeah.
major because it's the first book in the series, and that particular plot device is an absolute for the 4 books. So,
Oh gosh.
like,
Okay.
yay! I forgot
Yeah.
all about it. So that's why take meticulous notes and try to make sure I leave it all in the plotting because otherwise I want to forget.
Yeah. I get you. Yeah.
um, okay, there's something else uh, that piqued my interest on your blog. You were in Facebook jail and had to
Oh
deal with
gosh.
it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
what can I can only describe as one hell of a mess. So, did you ever get your blood pressure down, and how long did it take you to fix your Meta accounts? I only ask to highlight the troubles that people have while trying to market themselves on social media.
Yeah. And I'm still not completely out of it in that my account was hacked and somebody posted some really weird stuff on my Facebook page and then also took out ads to a tune of about several $100s on my Facebook page, on my author page, and of course didn't pay for them. And yeah, so I was blocked because they they did the ads thing, and then supposedly somebody took a look at it. I couldn't understand what it was. Somebody took a look at it and said it sounded like an Ethiopian warlord or something.
Uh,
I mean, it was like incomprehensible, this stuff that was posted.